Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. So today we're going to be checking out some excerpts from a book. It's called Mystique of Life on Planet Earth.
Intriguing title.
Right. And get this, it's written by someone who's kind of nearing the end of their life, thinking about the big questions.
Oh, I see, like a final reflection.
Exactly. But it's not your typical philosophical treatise. It's got personal stories woven in, reflections on how technology is changing everything. And then there's this model, they call it the rabbit hole.
Rabbit hole. Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, it's basically a set of 7 core principles. The author uses it to try to make sense of, well, existence, I guess.
Sounds like we're in for a thought-provoking deep dive.
Definitely. So the rabbit hole, think of it as like a safe space, a place where you can explore ideas that might seem a little unconventional.
I like that. Challenging the status quo.
Right. So where do we even begin with this?
Well, the author starts with energy. They believe it's the foundation of everything, like absolutely everything. But it's not as simple as it sounds.
Okay, how so?
They actually propose that there are different levels of energy, almost like a hierarchy.
So it's not just about the energy we get from food or electricity or things like that.
Right. They see those as examples of the energy we experience here on Earth, like the first level. But then they point to things like fire, explosions, even the energy we harness through technology.
I see. So what are these other levels then? What's beyond that basic earthly energy?
That's where it gets really interesting. The second level, they say, is an extraterrestrial energy source, something we don't fully understand yet.
Whoa, okay. Is this where UFOs come in? I know the author mentions those at some point.
You got it. They suggest that maybe, just maybe, UFOs are tapping into this unknown energy source, which would explain why they seem to defy our understanding of physics.
That's wild. All right, so we've got earthly energy, this mysterious extraterrestrial energy. Is there more?
There is. The third level is the most significant in the author's view. God's spiritual energy. They see it as the source of all creation, the force that powers the spirit, the soul.
The spirit. That's actually one of the 7 principles in the rabbit hole, right? My spirit, I think they call it.
You're right. The fourth principle. And it's all about the idea that who we are, our true selves, are separate from our physical bodies, that our spirits are eternal.
That makes me think about another one of the principles, time. The author has a very different take on it. It's not just about minutes and hours, is it?
Nope, not at all. They see time as multidimensional. Earth time is just a tiny slice of a much bigger picture. And this is where they bring in the idea of reincarnation. Our spirits could be journeying through different destinations, maybe even other planets, across different time dimensions.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. So it's not just a straight line from birth to death.
Exactly. It's a much more complex idea of time. And this ties back to the spirit being eternal, powered by this higher form of energy, meaning it can't be destroyed by anything on Earth.
Huh. It makes me think about those near-death experiences people talk about, that feeling of being separate from your body. Does the author mention anything about that?
They do. And they even suggest that during life, we might only have a subset of our total spiritual essence actually residing in our body.
So there's a part of us, of our spirit, that stays somewhere else, and only a fraction is here now.
That's what they're proposing. They even compare the brain to a cache memory for the spirit, only holding a small portion of the whole thing. And get this, they say we can actually receive spiritual upgrades throughout life.
Spiritual upgrades? Like what, suddenly becoming more insightful or changing your personality?
It could be things like that, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so if the spirit is eternal, potentially even traveling through different lifetimes, it makes you wonder what happens after we die here on Earth. Does the author believe in heaven and hell?
Now that's where it gets even more interesting. They actually reject the traditional heaven and hell idea. Instead, they have this concept. It's the fifth principle. They call it the hereafter.
The hereafter. So what is that exactly?
Well, they envision this thing called the good-bad spectrum, where you end up in the afterlife depends on all the experiences and actions you've accumulated, like in some kind of cosmic ledger. It's almost like a...
Cosmic resume.
Yeah, exactly. All your choices, your experiences, across all those potential lifetimes, they all factor in. And this is how they try to explain why sometimes good things happen to bad people and vice versa. It could be a consequence or a reward from a past life.
Okay, so it's not about punishment or reward in the traditional sense. It's more about, like, the spirit's journey, continuously growing and learning.
That's the idea. And it all ties back to another key principle, one God.
All right, now I'm really curious. How does the author approach that concept? Especially given, they're already challenging some pretty conventional religious ideas.
Yeah, well, they do believe in one God, like one ultimate creator of everything. They even acknowledge there could be multiple universes or some kind of divine hierarchy, but ultimately they see one force behind it all.
Because of how complex and vast creation is?
That's their reasoning. They see a higher intelligence at work everywhere. And they even use this belief to question the Big Bang Theory.
Wait, really? How so?
They don't disagree with the science, but they say there had to be something, some intelligence to set it up to make it happen. It couldn't have just been random chance.
Huh. I've never thought about it that way. So we've got energy, time, the spirit, the afterlife, one God. What are we missing? What are the last two principles in this rabbit hole?
The sixth one is called things, but it's not about material possessions. It's actually about all of God's creations.
So humans, animals, plants, everything.
Yeah, but it gets even more interesting. They suggest that even simple life forms, like insects, could have some kind of spiritual subset.
Wait, are they saying bugs have souls?
That's a really great question, and it leads to some pretty big ethical questions, which I think we should definitely dive into.
Okay, I'm definitely curious about that. But first, the seventh and final principle, places. What does the author even mean by that?
Well, places are like the locations where our spirits go to have all those spiritual experiences. And they're not just talking about heaven and hell. They're thinking much bigger.
So are they saying other planets could be part of that? Like part of this whole spiritual journey?
That's exactly what they're suggesting. They see this vast collection of places all designed to help the spirit evolve. And other planets, well, they could be destinations, places for the spirit to continue learning and growing.
Okay, my mind is still blown by that whole places idea, other planets being part of our spiritual journey. I never thought about it that way. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, you mentioned something about the ethical implications of everything having a spiritual aspect, even insects. Can we unpack that a bit more?
Oh, yeah, that's huge, right? And the author actually brings it up through this personal anecdote about their barber.
Pastor Gary.
Yeah, Pastor Gary. And this guy, apparently, he performs exorcisms.
I know. It's like, wait, what? He's a barber, but also an exorcist.
Right. But the author knows this guy, like really knows him. Describes him as super down-to-earth, practical, successful businessman, family man. Not some, fringe mystical character.
So he's not like wearing robes and chanting in a dark room.
Not at all. Which makes his story about performing exorcisms even more wild. Because he didn't plan on doing this, it kind of found him. During a mission trip to Jamaica, actually.
Okay, now I have to hear this Jamaica story. What happened?
So, Pastor Gary encounters this man who's clearly in distress. Like, full-on possession, the author says. Violent convulsions, talking in gibberish, totally different personality.
Whoa. Sounds like something straight out of a horror movie.
That's how the author describes it. But get this. Pastor Gary, who'd never done anything like this before, he feels compelled to perform an exorcism. And it works. He starts reciting biblical verses, stuff he didn't even know he knew, and eventually the man is free of whatever was tormenting him.
No way. Amazing, but also kind of terrifying. Right. And then the author says he's done like hundreds of exorcisms since then.
Hundreds. He even closed his barbershops, like completely shifted gears to dedicate his life to helping people who he believes are dealing with demonic possession.
Wow. That's got to take a lot of conviction. I bet that whole experience really shook up the author's own views, too.
Oh, for sure. They were already working on this rabbit hole idea. But this encounter with Pastor Gary forced them to really grapple with, the darker side of their own theory.
Because if there are good spiritual energies, which they believe in, then there could be negative ones, too, right? Logically.
Exactly. The author even compares it to a computer virus. Like these negative spiritual entities can actually invade and corrupt a person's spirit.
Oh, that's scary. It makes you wonder about free will. Do we actually have control over our choices, or are these unseen forces influencing us?
That's a big question, right? The author doesn't claim to have all the answers.
Yeah.
But they're definitely wrestling with it. And they do point out that Pastor Gary has also witnessed positive spirits associated with healing and miracles. So it's not all bad.
Okay, so there's hope. Forces for good, battling it out with the forces for evil.
Seems like it. The author paints this picture of the world as this super complex mix of light and darkness, good and bad, all these spiritual energies interacting.
It's a lot to think about. I can see why the author needed a framework like the rabbit hole to try and make sense of it all. But does the author give any practical advice for navigating all this? Like, how do we deal with this reality?
They do, and it boils down to a pretty simple phrase. Live it fully every day,
Mhm.
or LIFE for short.
LIFE. Okay, I like it. But what does that actually look like?
It's not about doing grand things or following some complicated rituals. It's more about just, being present, finding joy in each day, making choices that align with what you believe in. Like really simple stuff, but powerful too.
It sounds like a call to be mindful, to be responsible for your choices, even when faced with all this uncertainty about what it all means.
Right on. And the author doesn't stop there. They also delve into how technology is going to shape all of this in the coming years. Remember that whole section about predictions for the next 50 years?
So, yeah, things are going to get really interesting, according to them. What were some of the highlights?
Well, they see technology as a double-edged sword. Like, on one hand, amazing advancements in AI, space travel, medicine. But on the other hand, the potential for destruction, especially when it comes to warfare.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's already so much debate about, like, the ethics of AI and autonomous weapons. It's kind of scary.
Exactly. And the author predicts that traditional warfare is going to become obsolete. It'll be all drone strikes, cyber attacks, maybe even mind control. They're especially concerned about the impact on civilians and how technology could make global inequality even worse.
It's definitely a sobering thought, but it also means we have a responsibility, right, to make sure those technologies are used for good, not for harm. We can't just sit back and let it happen.
Totally agree. The author seems to be challenging us to really think about the future we want. A future where tech serves humanity, not the other way around.
So embracing progress, but being mindful of the potential consequences.
Exactly. And the author doesn't just focus on the negative. They also talk about all the amazing things tech could do, like personalized medicine, self-driving cars, even commercial space travel. Imagine regular people going to the moon or Mars.
Okay, now that's exciting, but it's a lot to process, right? All these deep questions about the spirit, the afterlife, technology changing everything. Does the author tie it all together in any way? Like, is there a common thread running through it all?
There is. And it's something they keep coming back to. Balance. It's woven through the whole rabbit hole model, even in their predictions about the future.
So finding that middle ground between the spiritual and the material, the good and the bad.
Exactly.
Mm.
And they actually illustrate this idea beautifully with a story from their childhood. They were at a baseball game with their dad, a military
Mhm.
man, and they were overwhelmed by everything, all the noise, the excitement. And their dad just said, "Son, all you have to do in life is stay between the lines."
Stay between the lines. That's so simple, but so powerful. It's about having boundaries, making good choices, finding that balance.
And the author sees it that way too. Like staying between the lines is their guiding principle, their secret sauce for navigating life. And they connect it right back to the rabbit hole model,
Mm.
keeping your energy in balance, finding balance in your spiritual growth.
So it's not just about like following the rules of society. It's about finding that internal balance, that harmony within yourself.
Right. Listening to your own internal compass, living in alignment with your values.
I love that. It's such a great message. But with all these complex ideas about the spirit, the afterlife, technology, does the author break it down? Like, how does this play out in everyday life?
They do.
Yeah.
And they bring it back to what they call the three essential ingredients for life. Remember, it's spirit, things, and places.
Okay, yeah. We talked about the spirit, the eternal part of us, but what about things? What does that mean, practically speaking?
Well, remember, things are all of God's creations. Humans, animals, plants, even insects, everything.
Right. And that's where those ethical considerations come in.
Yeah, because if everything has a spiritual aspect, it changes how we interact with the world around us.
And so it's not just about respecting our fellow human beings, it's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all life.
Beautifully said. And that leads right into the third ingredient, places. Remember, those are the destinations where spirits go to have all those spiritual experiences.
And that includes other planets,
Yes.
potentially.
Exactly. But it's not just about physical locations. It's about understanding that our spiritual journey happens in all sorts of places, within ourselves, in the world around us.
Okay, so we've covered so much. The rabbit hole model, Pastor Gary, and the whole exorcism thing, technology's wild future. Does the author offer any final thoughts, anything to help us wrap our heads around all of this?
They do. And it goes back to that idea of living each day to the fullest.
Mm.
Like really embrace your curiosity, question your assumptions, stay open to new possibilities.
So basically, the deep dive continues even after we're done talking.
Exactly. The author doesn't want to just give us all the answers. They want to spark that desire to keep searching. to keep exploring, to come up with our own understanding of the universe and how we fit into it.
I love that. The deep dive never really ends, right? It's like the author is handing us a map and saying, all right, go explore, see what you find.
It's a great analogy. And that's what makes these deep dives so rewarding. We're not just passively absorbing information, we're actively engaging with these ideas.
Totally. So as we wrap things up here, I'm curious, what's the biggest takeaway for you from this whole rabbit hole model?
Hmm, that's a good question. For me, it all comes back to that idea of balance. It's everywhere. All 7 principles, the different levels of energy, the good, bad spectrum, like it's fundamental to the author's whole view of existence.
I see that too. It's like they're acknowledging the complexity of the universe, but saying there's also this underlying order. If we can find that balance within ourselves, we can connect to it.
Exactly. And it ties into their whole live it fully everyday philosophy too. Being present, finding joy, making choices that are true to who you are, all about finding that balance.
And that's something everyone can relate to, I think. No matter what your beliefs are, we all want to live meaningful lives. And this rabbit hole model, it's like a roadmap for doing that.
It really is.
Mm.
And even when they talk about technology, that same idea of balance is still there. We have all this power to change things with technology, but we have to be careful how we use it.
Like we're at a turning point, and the decisions we make now are going to shape the future.
Powerful way to put it. And it brings us back to that idea of one God, the author's belief in a higher intelligence behind it all. Even with all the chaos and uncertainty, there's a sense that we're part of something much bigger.
It's humbling, for sure, but also inspiring, right? Knowing that we're not just random beings, but connected to something greater.
I think so. It's a beautiful thought, and hopefully something our listeners will take away from this.
So to everyone listening, don't stop here. Keep digging. Don't just accept the author's model. Question it, challenge it. Use it as a starting point to build your own understanding of the universe.
Absolutely. Revisit those parts that resonated with you. What really stuck out? What questions do you have about your own journey through this rabbit hole?
And remember that simple piece of advice. Live it fully every day. Embrace every moment. Make choices that reflect who you are and never stop exploring.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep living fully.